The air in the office that day felt thick, almost electric, like right before a massive thunderstorm hits. I remember the clock ticking on my monitor, the sounds suddenly amplified, and the cheap scent of burnt popcorn drifting from the communal kitchen, an utterly mundane detail clinging to one of the most satisfying moments of my professional life. You know that feeling, right? That slow, simmering burn of injustice, the one that keeps you up at 3 a.m. replaying conversations and wishing you'd said something clever, something cutting? Well, that burn was about to turn into a brilliant, cleansing fire. I was sitting at my desk, my tiny, cramped desk in the corner, the one I'd ironically chosen months ago for the uninterrupted focus it offered, when I saw the security guards. Not just one, but 2 tall guys in the standard dark blue uniforms, moving with a silent, deliberate purpose you usually only see when something has gone seriously wrong. And they were heading straight for the cluster of fancy, ergonomic desks in the middle of the open plan area. Liam and Sarah's desks. Now, for months, those desks had been a monument to their hustle, or, more accurately, their incredible ability to look busy while doing absolutely nothing productive on our shared project. But seeing those 2 guards approaching them, my heart started to pound a rhythm that was equal parts dread and pure, unadulterated anticipation. The dread was just a reflex, I think, a muscle memory from the days when I thought I was the one who was going to get fired for complaining too much. The anticipation, though, that was earned. It was the payoff for a calculated, risky game I'd been playing entirely alone, with my career and reputation hanging in the balance. Liam saw the guards first. He was mid-sentence, leaning back in his chair with that signature, smug grin he always wore when he was regaling Sarah with a story about his weekend. His face went instantly pale, the color draining out like a leaky faucet. Sarah, always the more composed of the 2, turned slowly, her expression morphing from polite boredom to utter, frozen bewilderment. The security lead, a guy named Rick who looked like he'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it, simply walked up to Liam's desk and placed a manila envelope on his keyboard. No shouting. No drama. Just a silent, undeniable act. And then he did the same to Sarah. Rick's voice, when he finally spoke, was low but cut through the office chatter like a razor blade. "Mr. Miller, Ms. Chen. Please gather your personal effects. You are to be escorted from the premises immediately. Your access has been revoked." That was it. No preamble. No, we need to talk. Just revoked. The office went silent, truly silent. The kind of silence where you can hear the hum of the HVAC system and the nervous shifting of people in their seats. Everyone was staring, doing that classic office maneuver where they pretend to be intensely focused on their monitor while soaking in every detail through their peripheral vision. Liam, the big talker, was suddenly stumbling over his words, trying to demand an explanation. Wait, what? This is insane. What is this about? I need to speak to Mr. Henderson. Rick just shook his head slightly, completely unmoved. Mr. Henderson has been informed and approved this action. I suggest you comply now, or we will have to assist you. That phrase, assist you, hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. They weren't being offered a choice. Sarah, to her credit, regained her composure slightly faster. She picked up the envelope, read the single page inside. I knew exactly what it was. It was the termination notice, citing a violation of the company's intellectual property and code of conduct policies, and slowly, deliberately, put it back down. She just stared at Liam, a look of pure, cold fury mixed with absolute terror. She knew that. They both knew. The game was up, and their spectacular bluff had been called. And me? I was still sitting at my little corner desk, my hands hovering over my keyboard, trying to look incredibly busy debugging a piece of test code, but every fiber of my being was focused on that slow-motion train wreck unfolding 30 feet away. I felt a wave of cold triumph wash over me, a feeling so potent it almost made me dizzy. This wasn't some petty office spat. This was justice delivered, meticulously planned, and completely unavoidable. You see, Liam and Sarah had taken credit for my work to get bonuses, and they were good at it. Charming, polished, and fantastic presenters. But they were about to learn the hard way that you can't build a career on someone else's foundation, especially not when that foundation is built on lines of code that are legally, irrefutably mine. If you're watching this right now, I want you to drop a comment below and tell me, where in the world are you watching this video from, and what time is it? Seriously, let me know. I love seeing where these stories land. The guards gave Liam and Sarah exactly 2 minutes to put their most essential items into a small box. They didn't get to clean out their drawers, say goodbye, or even log off properly. They were ushered out of the brightly lit, open-plan office and toward the elevators, two disgraced figures walking what felt like the longest, most public walk of shame imaginable. I watched them go, two figures of professional ambition reduced to being escorted by security, their faces a mixture of confusion, denial, and a terrifying recognition of what they'd done and who had finally caught them. And the best part? No one, absolutely no one, in the office had any idea that the quiet guy in the corner, Adam, was the one who pulled the strings. But that's getting ahead of myself. We have to go back to how this whole thing started. So, let's rewind a bit. My name is Adam. And if you had to sum me up in a single sentence 6 months ago, it would be, I was the guy who drank cold coffee at 2 a.m. while everyone else was asleep, chasing a line of code that felt like catching lightning in a jar. I'm a software engineer, and not to sound arrogant, but I'm a good one. My comfort zone isn't charming clients or making snappy presentations. It's being deep in the architecture, building things that solve problems no one else even realizes are solvable yet. I'm an introvert, a coder by calling, and frankly, a bit of a naive idiot when it came to office politics. My workspace, as I mentioned, was that little corner nook. My coding cave. It wasn't prestigious, but it was mine. It had the best natural light in the morning and, more importantly, it was far away from the water cooler small talk. My desk was a landscape of empty energy drink cans, a single, slightly warped picture of my dog, and 3 massive monitors displaying dizzying arrays of syntax. This was my universe. This was where the project, the one that would ultimately change everything, was born. The project was codenamed Aegis. It was an ambitious proposal to use advanced machine learning, specifically a unique blend of reinforcement learning and predictive analytics, to revolutionize how our company forecasted market shifts. The goal was to build a self-optimizing engine that could detect microfluctuations in real time, essentially giving us a 6-month head start on the competition. It was complex, groundbreaking, and terrifyingly difficult. The kind of project that could make or break a career. I had been secretly working on the core algorithms for nearly a year, just for fun, just because I thought it was cool. When I finally pitched the concept to Mr. Henderson, the VP of technology, I wasn't expecting much. But he loved it. He saw the dollar signs, the prestige, and the potential industry disruption. He greenlit it instantly, calling it a game changer, and allocated a huge budget and resources. And that's where my problem started. Because a project that big, with that much visibility, couldn't just be a solo endeavor for the quiet guy in the corner. It needed a team. It needed leadership and client-facing synergy. I just needed people to help with the heavy lifting, the database management, the front-end user interface, the parts that weren't the core AI engine. But what I got was Liam Miller and Sarah Chin. I remember that first meeting in the glass-walled conference room. I was buzzing, totally focused on the technical requirements, the algorithms, and the proof-of-concept timeline. Liam and Sarah, though, they were focused on the vibe. Liam was the smooth talker. 30-something, impeccably dressed, always smelling faintly of expensive cologne. He was ostensibly the project manager, but his true skill lay in what I would later call professional nodding. He could sit in a meeting, listen to me explain 3 weeks of complex mathematical modeling, and then summarize it for the executives in 2 eloquent, buzzword-laden sentences that made it sound like he invented the concept. He was great at morale, organizing team lunches, and sending encouraging, yet utterly vacuous, emails. He made a project feel important. Sarah was the client liaison, and the supposed UX/UI expert. She was sharp, ambitious, and had an almost unsettling ability to gauge what people wanted to hear. She was the one who could turn a rough, functional prototype into a glossy, attractive demo. But her actual contributions to the code? Minimal. She spent more time choosing the perfect font and color palette for the future presentation deck than she did integrating the APIs. She was the polish, the packaging, the visible veneer of professionalism. I, Adam, was the engine. The one who was responsible for the $20 million technology actually working. They were the PR firm. In those first few months, I genuinely liked them. Liam was funny. Sarah was engaging. They made the long hours feel less lonely. We would talk about movies, joke about office life, and they'd offer those little, harmless-sounding encouragements. "Dude, you are a machine, Adam. I don't know how you crank this code out," Liam would exclaim, totally ignoring the fact that he'd spent his entire workday on calls that produced 0 deliverables. "The math on this is incredible, Adam. Truly genius," Sarah would say, peering over my shoulder and trying to look knowledgeable before asking me where the nearest coffee shop with oat milk was. They were professional cheerleaders, and I was so deeply entrenched in the Aegis code that I didn't care who got the credit for the peripheral stuff. I just wanted my baby, the core AI, to work perfectly. I was a naive fool, blinded by my passion for the work itself. I remember Liam once giving me a high five after I fixed a massive bug in the data pipeline at 1 a.m. It felt good. It felt like we were a dream team. What I didn't realize was that while I was pouring my soul into the code, they were already quietly, strategically building the narrative. They were meticulously crafting the story of Liam and Sarah's breakthrough project, with a talented junior coder named Adam doing some of the grunt work. They were collecting all the credit chips while I was still busy playing the game. I was giving them the keys to the kingdom, and they were preparing the banquet in my name, planning to leave me to do the washing up. The true nature of their partnership, and their betrayal, was just beginning to take shape. The next few months were a blur of caffeine, debugging, and the slow, grinding realization that I was the only one actually working. Aegis became my world. I wasn't just working on the project, I was living it. I'd arrive before sunrise and leave long after the janitorial staff had made their rounds. My social life became the stack of servers in the secure room, and my only companion was the pulsing green cursor on my terminal. This was when I really started to feel that project, that core AI engine, was truly mine. I was the one feeding it data, training the models, and solving the nearly impossible technical hurdles. Meanwhile, Liam and Sarah's contribution shifted from professional cheerleading to professional ghosting. Liam, the project manager, was supposed to handle resource allocation, vendor relations, and risk management. Instead, every meeting with the wider department heads or the finance team became an opportunity for him to present a beautiful slide deck that I had compiled the content for, which he'd then talk over, using phrases like synergistic outcomes and leveraging next-gen architecture, always ending with a confident smile that suggested he'd personally invented electricity. He would constantly tell me, "Adam, I'm clearing the path for you, buddy. Just keep coding. Don't worry about the noise." But that path clearing seemed to involve a lot of long lunches and suspiciously early departures. Sarah was even subtler. She would occasionally request access to the latest code branch, claiming she needed to ensure front-end compatibility or test user flows. In reality, she was taking screenshots of the functional running code, the visualizations and the outputs, and using them to craft incredibly glossy, persuasive updates for Mr. Henderson. She was building the image of success, using my substance. I remember one particularly frustrating afternoon. I'd been up for 40 hours straight, solving a dependency issue that threatened to derail the entire system. I was running on pure adrenaline and desperation. I finally fixed it and sent a terse, exhausted email update to the team at 4 a.m. Later that day, Liam forwarded my technical update, verbatim, to Mr. Henderson with a one-line intro. "Great progress on the dependency fix, thanks to the team's late-night dedication." Note the plural, teams. He was taking my sweat and turning it into a shared victory, a shared bonus check. It was 1,000 small cuts like this. My suggestions being brushed aside in private meetings, only to be enthusiastically presented as Liam's brilliant idea an hour later in a wider forum. My name was gradually receding into the fine print. They were masterful at the art of the pronoun switch. Instead of, "Adam's work on the core engine is impressive," it became, "We, as a team, have achieved impressive milestones on the core engine." And when they talked to the executives, the "we" subtly became I. I was naive, sure, but I wasn't stupid. The feeling of being erased started to gnaw at me. It wasn't the lack of praise that hurt, it was the active, strategic appropriation. They weren't just taking credit, they were actively making sure I didn't get it. They were positioning themselves as the architects and visionaries, with me as the faceless, interchangeable laborer. The emotional connection I'd felt with them was completely severed. They weren't partners, they were leeches. The turning point in my emotional response came one Friday afternoon. I was in the server room, checking the latest data ingestion metrics for Aegis, and I overheard Liam on a private call in the hallway outside. He didn't know I was there. He was talking to someone, maybe a friend, maybe a recruiter, and his voice was loud, celebratory. Yeah, man, it's a slam dunk. The bonuses on this thing are going to be insane. Sarah and I pulled it off. We've been burning the midnight oil on this AI project for months, and the VP loves the presentation we put together. I'm thinking new car money, maybe even a down payment. The best part? The coder, Adam? He's brilliant, but seriously, the dude just lives for the keyboard. He doesn't care about the optics, so we've handled all the, important stuff. That's when it hit me. He doesn't care about the optics. They saw my dedication, my introversion, and my focus on the code not as a trait to be respected, but as a weakness to be exploited. It wasn't an accident. It was a conscious, predatory strategy. They weren't my friends or my teammates. They were professional thieves who specialized in intellectual property theft disguised as project management. The initial sting of betrayal quickly solidified into something colder, sharper. That day, I went home not with the exhaustion of a coder who had worked too hard, but with the focused, quiet rage of someone who had just been robbed. They wanted my work. They wanted the bonus. They wanted the promotion. They could have the temporary glory. But I decided right then and there that they were not going to have their jobs. The gloves were off, and the naive Adam was gone. The new Adam, the one who lived for solving complex problems, had just found a new, high-stakes bug to fix: Liam and Sarah. The project reached its climax about 2 weeks after I overheard Liam in the hallway. We had officially hit the beta milestone, and the system, Aegis, was running live against historical data with an astonishing 97% predictive accuracy. It was, scientifically speaking, a triumph. My triumph. This meant it was time for the phantom presentation, the grand reveal to the C-suite, the one that would determine the bonuses, the promotions, and the future direction of the company. I was technically invited to the presentation, of course, but only to be the technical backup. I was told to sit quietly in the back, ready to answer any incredibly specific, granular questions about the memory allocation or the neural network architecture, questions Liam and Sarah, naturally, couldn't answer. I was the safety net, the unseen man behind the curtain. The setting was the executive boardroom, all mahogany, glass, and a view that stretched across the city. Mr. Henderson was there, along with the CFO, the COO, and a few key board members. The stakes were astronomical. Liam kicked off the presentation. He looked fantastic, sharp suit, confident posture, and that winning, almost presidential smile. He opened with a compelling narrative about the visionary journey of Aegis. He used the word "we" a lot. We saw an opportunity. We engineered a solution. We believe this will redefine. He was masterful. He sounded like the kind of person who deserves to be paid $1 million. Then Sarah took over for the deep dive. She presented the data visualization, which was indeed beautiful. She'd clearly spent days perfecting the charts and graphs, but it was all showing the output of the engine I had built. She talked about the system's innovative learning protocols and the unique data ingestion models. She explained the success metrics with such eloquent confidence that the executives were nodding along. It was my algorithms, my architecture, and my late-night debugging being polished into corporate poetry and delivered by her. My name, Adam, was mentioned exactly once, halfway through the 40-minute presentation, in a slide listing the core development contributors. It was nestled down in the bottom left corner in size 10 font, right next to the names of the outsourced database vendor and the pizza delivery guy who came by most weekends. Okay, not really, but it felt that way. But what really made my blood run cold wasn't the omission, it was the outright lie. Towards the end, during the Q&A, the CFO asked a highly technical question about the proprietary self-correction loop, the single most difficult, unique piece of code I had spent 3 months perfecting. Liam didn't miss a beat. He stepped up, looked the CFO straight in the eye, and said, with an air of humble confidence, "That was something Sarah and I designed personally." It was a complex challenge, but the core innovation lies in its simplicity and efficiency. My hand actually clenched on the notepad I was holding. I felt the paper crinkle. They took credit for my work, right there, in front of the most powerful people in the company, and they used my technical jargon to do it. It was a bold-faced lie, a spectacular piece of intellectual larceny. I could feel the heat rising up my neck. After the meeting, the atmosphere was euphoric for Liam and Sarah. Mr. Henderson shook their hands vigorously. A phenomenal achievement. Absolutely groundbreaking. We're moving forward with full implementation. Expect significant bonuses and talks of new leadership roles very soon. He gave me a brief, distant nod on his way out. Good job, Adam. Keep supporting the team. That was the stinging betrayal. The sight of Liam and Sarah practically vibrating with victory, their eyes already calculating how much their new houses would cost, while I was relegated to the status of a helpful intern. The quiet kid who did the typing. I walked back to my coding cave in a daze. I wasn't just angry, I was incandescent. They were going to get hundreds of thousands of dollars, significant promotions, and career acceleration based entirely on my code. They had stolen my professional identity. But here's the thing about me. I'm not a fighter in the usual sense. I don't shout or throw things. I analyze. I strategize. I find the vulnerability in the system. And as I sat there, staring at my monitors filled with the thousands of lines of code that were mine, a very cold, calm thought entered my head. They think I don't care about the optics, but I care about the intellectual property. I knew better than anyone that the core of Aegis was built on my unique, original algorithms. It wasn't standard library code. It was my intellectual signature. It was time to stop being the safety net and start being the executioner. My immediate next step wasn't to storm into the VP's office and yell. That would have been emotional, messy, and easily dismissed as the complaint of a jealous subordinate. My next step was surgical. It was legal. It was time to activate the contingency plan I didn't even know I was forming until that moment. It was time to make sure that the code, my code, was irrefutably stamped with my name, legally, definitively, and secretly. The game was no longer about credit, it was about ownership. I didn't waste a second. The day after the executive presentation, instead of clocking in at the usual 6 a.m., I took a sick day. No dramatic exit, no angry email, just a polite, one-line message to Liam and Sarah about feeling under the weather. I knew they wouldn't care. They were probably already celebrating their impending promotions. This time away wasn't for rest, it was for the meticulous, legal groundwork of my counterstrike. My first call was to my personal intellectual property lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies whom I had used a few times for small personal app contracts. I laid out the situation with the cold, precise language of a technical report. I gave her the timeline, the company's IP agreements, and the crucial distinction between work product, which belongs to the company, and original, proprietary algorithms, where authorship matters greatly, especially regarding potential bonuses and internal credit. The key was the code itself. Every line of the complex machine learning architecture in Aegis was written by me. It contained unique algorithms and unconventional solutions that were my personal intellectual signature. The company owned the deployment of the software, but the authorship of the proprietary code was an open discussion under my employment contract, especially since I had initially developed the core concepts on my own time. Over the next 48 hours, I worked with Ms. Davies on the legal lifeline. My goal was not to steal the code back. That was neither ethical nor possible. My goal was to establish an undeniable, documented, third-party paper trail proving that I, Adam, was the sole creator and primary author of the specific, proprietary logic at the heart of the project. First, I compiled the proof package. This was a comprehensive, encrypted archive containing original timestamps and commit logs, Git commits showing every single line of the core AI code was checked in under my employee ID and timestamped, proving when and how the critical components were built. Early concept documentation, scanned images of my physical notebooks filled with the original mathematical proofs and initial design sketches, created months before the project was even officially greenlit. The copyright application, the most crucial step. Ms. Davies quickly filed a preliminary but legally binding copyright claim with the U.S. Copyright Office for the unique sequence of my core algorithms, clearly defining the difference between the work for hire, the implementation, and the original creation, the underlying logic. This wasn't to sue the company, but to create an irrefutable external document that predated any executive decision about promotions. The beauty of this plan was that it didn't violate my contract. I wasn't stealing company data. I was simply creating a time-stamped, externally validated record of my original intellectual property and tying it directly to the current, successful version of Aegis. Liam and Sarah's crime wasn't theft from me. It was lying to the C-suite and claiming company IP that they hadn't created. My proof would just make that lie evident. The moment the final documentation was secured, stamped, and filed by Ms. Davies, I felt a calm return that I hadn't realized I'd lost. The rage was gone, replaced by the deep, focused satisfaction of a programmer who has just closed a complicated logic loop. The problem was defined, and the solution was implemented. Now it was time for execution. I returned to the office the next morning, acting exactly as I had before, quiet, focused, and slightly introverted. Liam and Sarah were their usual cheerful selves, buzzing about their post-presentation glory. Liam actually clapped me on the shoulder. "Good to see you, buddy. You missed a great team lunch yesterday. We're riding high, thanks to all our hard work." He still didn't get it. He still thought I was just happy to be included. I spent that day compiling the final payload. It wasn't the raw code or a ranting letter. It was a perfectly organized, highly selective dossier of undeniable evidence. I put the entire package, the commit logs, the time-stamped emails, the scanned notebook pages, and most importantly, the official letter from Ms. Davies confirming the filing of the IP authorship claim, into a single, small, encrypted file. I called it Aegis_authorship_verification.zip. This wasn't a warning. This was a bomb. And I knew exactly where to drop it for maximum impact. This was the fun part. The moment when the careful, surgical plan finally met the reality of corporate chaos. The dossier, Aegis_authorship_verification.zip, was sitting on my desktop, ready to go. I wasn't going to hand it to a junior HR rep or slide it under Mr. Henderson's door. That was too traceable, too easy to dismiss as a disgruntled employee's complaint. I needed the element of surprise and the highest level of accountability. I logged into my professional, corporate email account. I composed a single email with the subject line, "Urgent, critical IP violation regarding Project Aegis and material misrepresentation." The body was brief, formal, and devoid of emotion. I kept my personal feelings entirely out of it. "Dear Mr. Henderson, please find attached a highly confidential, encrypted file detailing irrefutable evidence concerning the sole authorship of the proprietary core algorithms powering Project Aegis. The information within indicates a material misrepresentation of development contributions made during the recent C-suite presentation by members of the project team, specifically regarding the core innovation credited to Ms. Chin and Mr. Miller. Due to the severity of this discrepancy, which directly impacts corporate bonuses, promotions, and adherence to our code of conduct and IP policies, I urge you to review this evidence immediately and discreetly before making any final decisions regarding the team's future roles. The decryption key is the 6-digit project code we used in the initial pitch. Sincerely, Adam, my last name. And then I hit send. The recipients were precisely targeted: Mr. Henderson, VP of Tech, and, crucially, Ms. Evelyn Reed, Chief Human Resources Officer. Mr. Henderson needed to know the technical truth. Ms. Reed needed to know the legal and ethical violation. By looping in HR's highest authority, I made sure this couldn't just be swept under the rug as a misunderstanding. This was now a formal HR and IP issue, with potential legal consequences for the company if they ignored it. The moment the email sent, I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked straight out of the office. I didn't clock out or tell anyone where I was going. I went to a quiet coffee shop several blocks away and just watched the city go by. I needed to be physically distant from the epicenter when the explosion happened. I knew the silence on my phone was just the quiet before the storm. I waited 4 hours. 4 hours of cold brew and nervous anticipation. Around 2:30 p.m., my personal cell phone, not my work phone, rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it. Adam? This is Evelyn Reed. Her voice was sharp, measured, and tight. I need you to come back to the office immediately. You need to come to my office. Do not speak to anyone on your way up. Do you understand? Yes, Ms. Reed. I'll be there in 20 minutes. That short call was the final confirmation. They had opened the file. They had seen the time-stamped code logs, the pre-project notebook scans, and the official copyright filing letter from Ms. Davies. The irrefutable nature of the evidence meant there was no gray area, no room for Liam and Sarah to wiggle out of it. It wasn't my word against theirs. It was their lie against cold, hard, documented fact. The walk back to the office felt different. I wasn't the quiet, naive coder anymore. I was the architect of their downfall, walking into the final scene of my own drama. I went straight to the 20th floor, the executive level, and walked directly into Ms. Reed's office. Mr. Henderson was already there, looking pale and utterly furious. He didn't look furious at me, though. He looked furious at the betrayal, at the fact that he had been made to look like a fool in front of the board. Ms. Reed got straight to the point. Adam, we have reviewed the document. The evidence is, frankly, damning. The commit logs and the external IP registration prove your sole authorship of the proprietary algorithms you described. When did you register this authorship? 2 days ago, Ms. Reed, immediately after the presentation, I replied, my voice steady. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. They credited themselves with your most unique work, Adam. The core innovation. We were about to approve massive bonuses and elevate them to director roles. Did you confront them? No, sir, I said simply. I gathered proof. I chose to let the facts speak for themselves. Ms. Reed nodded slowly, absorbing that. A wise choice. We had Liam and Sarah in here about an hour ago. We didn't show them the document immediately. We asked them to reconfirm their roles and contributions to the self-correction loop, specifically. They doubled down on the lie, Mr. Henderson. They claimed it as joint, personal innovation. A cold, delicious satisfaction washed over me. They were too greedy, too arrogant to backtrack. They had walked right into the trap. Ms. Reed continued, when we presented the proof, your commit logs and the IP filing, they had no defense. The violation of corporate conduct is clear, and the misrepresentation to the C-suite is grounds for immediate, non-negotiable termination for cause. We are moving immediately to an internal investigation and termination. The boardroom bloodbath was already in motion. I hadn't even had to raise my voice. I had simply presented the facts, and the system, flawed as it was now correctly processing the data to achieve the required outcome, justice. I had solved the bug called Liam and Sarah. The meeting with Mr. Henderson and Ms. Reed was swift and decisive, but the aftermath was the true spectacle. They were efficient. While I was still in Ms. Reed's office, talking about the future of Aegis and how we could ensure the code remained secure and properly credited going forward, the wheels of corporate termination were already turning. Security had been briefed, and the stage was set for the final, humiliating act. Ms. Reed informed me, Adam, for your protection and for procedural reasons, we need you to remain here on the executive floor for a short while. We are bringing them back in now to formalize the action. Mr. Henderson, who had moved from fury to a kind of grim professionalism, added, This is deeply regrettable, Adam, but your response was calculated and correct. You protected our company's intellectual asset and yourself from two very manipulative individuals. About 10 minutes later, I heard the raised voices. They weren't coming from Ms. Reed's office, but from the conference room just down the hall, where Liam and Sarah had been waiting, blissfully unaware that their fate had already been sealed. I could only hear snippets, but the emotional tenor was unmistakable. First, there was the sound of Liam's smooth, confident voice suddenly cracking into high-pitched panic. "I don't understand. This is a misunderstanding. We worked on the presentation, the marketing. The whole concept was ours." Then, Sarah's icy composure finally shattered. Her voice was pure venom, tinged with disbelief. "You can't do this. Who filed this? Where did this even come from? We built this project. We were promised promotions." Ms. Reed's voice, which was rarely raised, cut through the noise, cool and authoritative. "Ms. Chen, Mr. Miller. The documentation is irrefutable. Your termination is effective immediately for cause, citing intellectual property fraud and material misrepresentation to the executive leadership. Your company access has been revoked. Security is en route to escort you out." That phrase, "escort you out," was the final hammer blow. I remembered the feeling I had months ago, watching them effortlessly claim my work, and the quiet promise I had made to myself in that server room. Now, the tables had turned, not through a fit of pique, but through meticulous, undeniable legal fact. I stayed in the office, looking out the massive window at the city skyline, trying to regulate my breathing. I felt a confusing mix of powerful vindication and professional sadness. No matter how bad they were, watching someone's career implode is heavy. But the voice of the naive Adam, the one who'd been exploited, was louder. They deserve this. And then, the moment I had witnessed earlier, the one that had started this entire story, unfolded again. I watched through the glass partition of Ms. Reed's office as Liam and Sarah emerged from the conference room. The two security guards were waiting for them. Liam was gesturing wildly, his tie askew, still trying to argue with the air around him. Sarah was silent, her eyes blazing, clutching her termination notice like it was a live grenade. They were told to surrender their key cards and company phones immediately. This was the walk of shame. It was long and public. They were forced to walk past their desks, past my desk, past everyone they had lorded their coming success over for months. Every employee in the Open Plan office, who had watched them preen and prosper, was now watching them fall. People pretended to type, but the silence was deafening. As they passed my corner, Liam caught my eye. His face twisted into a mask of pure hatred and dawning comprehension. He knew. He finally, agonizingly knew. I didn't smile, didn't smirk, didn't move a muscle. I just met his gaze, the quiet corner guy, and held it until the guards physically ushered him toward the elevators. It was the most satisfying, silent conversation of my life. They took credit for my work, so I took their jobs. The title I'd always wanted for this story, the one that perfectly summarized the cold, hard reversal. They were gone. Escorted out of the building, just like in the movies, their corporate careers vaporized in a matter of hours. The tension in the office immediately dropped, replaced by a confused, speculative buzz. Everyone was whispering, but no one knew the actual script. They just knew that the two rising stars had crashed and burned, and that the quiet coder, Adam, was still there, sitting exactly where he belonged. The silence they left behind was louder than any shouting match. With Liam and Sarah gone, the entire dynamic of the department shifted. The initial shock quickly gave way to a wave of nervous curiosity. People were whispering, gathering in small clusters, trying to piece together the explosive drama they'd just witnessed. All they knew was that the Golden Children, the ones who had presented the game-changing project, were marched out by security, and the quiet guy in the corner was still sitting there, seemingly untouched by the chaos. I stayed on the executive floor for another hour, finalizing the immediate next steps with Mr. Henderson and Ms. Reed. The conversation had completely changed. I wasn't an exploited subordinate anymore. I was a key asset, a necessary safeguard, and the actual brain behind the company's biggest technological leap in a decade. The promotion wasn't even a question. It was a required course correction. Mr. Henderson leaned back, looking exhausted but resolved. Adam, your actions, while unconventional, were professionally meticulous. You protected the company's interest and exposed a serious breach of trust. We cannot, in good conscience, Allow this level of contribution to go unrecognized. Effective immediately, the title of project lead for Aegis is yours. You will report directly to me, and you will have full autonomy over the project's technical direction and staffing. This was the complete professional reversal. I wasn't just getting a promotion, I was getting their jobs rolled into one. Liam was the project manager, Sarah was the client liaison/UX lead, and I was the technical engine. Now, I was the single point of contact for the entire multi-million-dollar project. The bonus structure they were about to walk into? That now belonged to the true author of the work. Ms. Reed finalized the paperwork for the promotion, and I signed the new contract right there in her office. The new salary was nearly double my old one, plus a hefty immediate bonus tied to the successful beta milestone, the one Liam and Sarah had tried to claim. It felt incredibly validating to sign that document, to formalize the fact that the company was now paying me what I was truly worth, thanks to my own careful strategy. When I finally walked back down to my floor, it wasn't the same. I didn't go back to my old corner desk. I was immediately shown to a new office, glass walls, better view, and a heavy wooden door that actually shut. It was Liam's old office. My immediate thought was that this was a little too dramatic, but then I remembered the smugness, the lies, and the stolen credit, and I figured, you know what? I earned this view. I sat down at the large desk, which felt alien after years spent hunched over a tiny corner cube. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of professional peace. Not just relief that the betrayal was over, but a deep, quiet satisfaction that the system, though it had failed me initially, had corrected itself based on undeniable data. I had treated the betrayal like a massive technical problem. Identify the flaw, gather the data, execute the fix, and deploy the solution. And the solution was now running perfectly. Later that afternoon, I looked out the window of my new office. I felt the weight of the last few months lift off my shoulders. It wasn't about revenge, it was about the sanctity of the work. They had disrespected my effort and my intellect, and I had simply deployed the legal and technical truth to remove them from the equation. The last piece of the puzzle was the lingering question that always follows a win this dramatic. Was it worth it? It absolutely was. I protected my intellectual property, secured the career trajectory I deserved, and restored ethical integrity to a project that was crucial to the company. I went from being the forgotten coder to the recognized, invaluable project lead, and I did it all without raising my voice, simply by letting the code, and the law, speak for itself. My final thought as I looked at the vast, complex architecture of the Aegis project on my screen, now proudly running under my direct supervision, was one of quiet triumph. They took credit for my work, so I took their jobs. And that, my friends, is how you win the office politics game when your weapon is pure, unassailable truth. If you enjoyed this story, if you ever had to fight for your own credit, or if you just love watching a meticulously planned professional revenge story unfold, please drop a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe for more stories like this. Your support helps me keep telling these deep dives into professional drama.